Hello, everyone. Get ready for a wild ride. This will probably be my longest post. It is November 12th, 2020, and it has been an amazing 2 weeks. We're usually talking about the pandemic, how it's affecting the markets, but we've had a US presidential election that has been unlike any other. Um, Hard to say where to start. So, why don't we come over to Market Watch and so here we are in 2020. We had an election between incumbent President Donald Trump and Democratic contender Joe Biden, and nobody really called it the first day, and it was a little back and forth. Um, And then as things were pushing toward a Biden win a few days later, the incumbent president Donald Trump um, began to complain more that there was illegal voting, that there was rampant voter fraud, um, and has thus far filed a bunch of lawsuits that um, have been thrown out. I think maybe about a dozen. Um, so here we're looking at the S&P, right? Here's when the markets first responded to COVID. Trough down here. We had a really nice run up, but it's been pretty choppy. Um, so essentially, where are we here? Okay, so election day, right, was the 3rd, and we start going up, and then it was Saturday the 7th, when it was called for Biden, right? So that was over the weekend. So you can see the markets were kind of running up to it, and they got the news. I was checking the futures. So the futures on this weekend were up, and as we can see, when the markets opened on the 9th, um, they they did pretty well as the futures projected. Interestingly, when Trump was first elected, the futures were down that night, but then during the next day, after the announcement of his election, the market was up. So in this case, it did not respond so unpredictably. Um, and another reason, another reason that things popped here was the announcement of a vaccine, and we'll go into that a little bit too. Um, let's see, over on Yahoo, um, right? We've got the ongoing debate. It's not becoming quite as loud. The people who are really concerned about the president not doing a concession speech and so forth, um, build it up to a potential coup. Um, and perhaps those who are less concerned say, oh, well, he's going to file some lawsuits, they're going to fail, and then, he'll adjust and move on. But this is news today. So this Biden win in Arizona confirmed. As an analyst says, there's now no way back for Trump. There was a little bit of hope hanging out for Trump in Arizona, and yeah, that's now been seized. So um, let's come over to the market side. So really the talk now, and I guess why we're still doing this program, is a second wave of COVID and the concern about that. Um, I'm going to skip ahead right here. So this is the United States. Daily deaths is a great indicator, even though it's lagging. It's gives us pretty good data, irrespective of testing rates. Um, on the basis that anybody who dies from it is most guaranteed to be known that's what they died from. They'll be tested from it, as they're dying, but you don't get confused with a bunch of asymptomatic people, and whether everybody who's positive has even gotten a test. Okay, so here's the point, right? We peaked here. I mean, the markets. It's crazy to think, right? The markets. Wow. I'm stunned looking at this. So the markets bottomed here around mid-March. And then the daily deaths, yeah, about a month before those daily deaths started to ramp. And then, we very diligent closing schools, restaurants, and everything else, bottomed out, had a little bit of a bump there. But now, right, as you can see, it's got these three projections, right? So this bottom one is saying if we were super conservative, top one is kind of meaningless. It doesn't really show what's going to happen. The current projection is this middle one, right? And I think it makes sense because we've already demonstrated this sort of tolerance of how bad it has to get in order for us to respond. But we still don't know that. People could feel emboldened by the potential of a vaccine, tired of being locked down, whatever that ends up being higher than this. But where are we right now? They're looking at a peak mid-January, which would be nice because the United States is not doing very well on this from a global perspective. Disneyland's still closed in California or something. Okay. So coming over to the Fox Business site, this the PR thing sounded really interesting. I clicked through that. It actually wasn't all that interesting. I mean, maybe the most scandalous aspect was they were no bid contracts. Yeah, complaining about Disneyland. Yeah, that's a terrible thing. Because of course, yes, we've also had protests and riots, and it's I don't always know if that is going on in my local town of Seattle, but it has occurred. Okay, I don't think there was much more over here. U.S. clock record deficit in October on pandemic spending. So over on Seeking Alpha, we're talking a lot, about lockdown, right? Um, I don't remember where it was, but there was another headline about people starting to panic buy again, and that the scientists that Biden is bringing on are recommending a lockdown. Um, right, the retail apocalypse, it's not over yet, and yeah, it's one thing that a lot of people have reported living in these times is a distorted sense of time. Um, and I've also experienced this. It's it's hard to describe, but there's not too much different going on in my life except not really hanging out with friends at bars downtown, and not going to church in person, um, and the kids not being in school. But these things, which could just seem kind of minor, have still been enough to, yeah, cause some odd distortion. Um, what I've been panic buying during the tech sell-off. I don't think we need to go into more than this. Let's pop over to MSNBC. I was curious what this meant about weaponizing unpopularity votes, and it was something about, like, well, the people who are still saying, the election's a fraud and carrying on as if Trump doesn't have to leave, um, are saying, well, people don't like us anyway, so we're just going to remove these people and stay in office. Um, but yeah, you can understand the concern with the left. What is happening with this election? It's pretty ignorant. Um, it's almost as if, without understanding um, the checks and balances of our election process, um, you can get whipped up into a frenzy. If you're told that, oh, there's millions of illegal ballots, and that can cause concern. But if you knew how the system worked, what was the stat? It was like, these international firm, figured we have 6 illegal votes per million or per 10 million or something. So, yes, illegal voting occurs, but it's just not enough to change the destiny of the election. And there's been this ongoing um, dialogue from some holdouts around Trump that somehow he doesn't have to leave. But even a lot of Republicans think he's just going to get over it and will tell tell people he's going to run again in 2024, and that'll be their off ramp. Okay, on to the vaccine. So I heard about the vaccine a few days ago. The markets were up when it was announced, and a lot of people were excited about it. So I'm like, okay, well, let's have a little look here. Um, so one of the big problems is it's got to be stored super cold just shortly before it's injected. Um, if you put it in like a cooler and only open it twice a day with dry ice, maybe it lasts 15 days. You can put it in a regular freezer for 5 days. Um, but the other thing is that, like, this Pfizer vaccine, what was it saying? Like, it'll send half to the U.S. and because people have to get it twice, you get a second dose 3 weeks after. Um, that only 12.5 Americans are going to get it next year. Like, yeah, it's not a lot of people. Um, so fortunately, there are plenty of others, working on other vaccines. But then it's like, okay, well, if there's multiple vaccines for the same thing, but they have different characteristics, how's that all going to be managed? It's not going to be quite as straightforward as distributing the normal flu vaccine. Um, And, so it's funny talking about this because I can imagine that, Pfizer's, super cold, inconvenient vaccine is going to get, blown out and made obsolete by something else. But right now, we don't have something else. Right now, this is what people are talking about. This is what they're excited about. And you probably wouldn't even be able to find this if you searched for it 3 years from now. If there was actually another vaccine that ended up saving the day. This Pfizer vaccine, you search a vaccine, COVID, it'll just get buried. Hopefully Pfizer's working on something that just, can be done in one dose and doesn't have to be at super, super freezing. All right, so just moving on. Look at this beautiful Four Seasons hotel in Philadelphia. It's gorgeous, and that's what Giuliani, Trump's lawyer, I guess initially meant to book but didn't book. Somebody messed up, so they get the back of the Four Seasons total landscaping just outside of Philly. Um, and apparently, like, during his speech, that's when the election was called. This was last Saturday. Um, and the reaction, I mean, to see all this here was amazing. Of course, the comedians were having a great time with it because, if you look at this place, this Four Seasons landscaping, and you look across the street, well, we've got Delaware Valley Cremation Center and even like an adult bookstore right there. Um, uh, a crazy sight to see, as if the allegations of voter fraud weren't enough. Is that it? Did we cover everything? Um, I kind of feel bad for having gone, almost a week or so um, without having published one because so many things are happening. Um, Shutdown economy could cost the Dow 4,000 points. Strategist David Nelson of the Bellpont Asset Management. 3 or 4,000. See, but let's look at this though. So the Dow's at 29,000, and in March got down to 18.5. So what were you here? About 29, the same. It's actually 10,000 points. Gosh, 18 up to 29. Um, wow. So 4,000 points actually does seem kind of reasonable. It already gave up 10,000 and recovered most of it. So yeah, maybe we are looking at that, and I guess that's the reason I'll keep doing these, because COVID is not over, and neither is 2020. So you can tell that to your hindsight.